if I'm already live. This looks like it's just loading. Okay. So hello and welcome to the first Technical Tuesday of 2021. Happy New Year to everyone. Hope everyone had a healthy and happy holiday season. It's been a little crazy since the year started here. As you can see, my usual background has changed with 2 adults working from home and 2 children now in school virtually. We have found it's very challenging to find a little closet or space where you can shut the door and not hear all the other conversations going on around you in the background. So for all of you who are in the same boat, I feel your pain. We'll get through it. Hopefully 2021 will be better. As we start the new year, I figured what would be more pertinent to talk about than a little bit about what happened at the Capitol last week. I'm not getting into the political side of it, just as my beginning there. I'm not going into the politics of any of it. What I wanted to look at a little bit more today is the actual building itself and kind of just have, I guess, a few minute academic chat that some of us preservationists have been having about repair versus retaining damage. And there were a few examples that were given on a couple different sites that we're a part of and whatnot. But what I would really love is thoughts from you guys. Again, not the sounding board for lots about what's happening. There's lots of places for that. But just a bit more about your thoughts on generally repair versus retaining, and maybe we can use the Capitol as a starting point and kind of move off from there. So no need to go into details for what happened because I think we all know by now. So as I said, we've been talking about whether to repair the damage or retain it. There are arguments for each. And in preservation, very often, we want to see everything restored. We want to see everything look just as it did in its heyday or whatever the period of significance is. So obviously the first thought is, well, of course, everything needs to be repaired. But then the more it's thought of and more preservation approaches now are, do we retain bits and pieces of it so that it continues to tell either a story or it makes a point or it's a learning experience? It's something that's interpretive. And so that's a lot of the questions that are going on now. And like everything else about Washington at the moment, it's a very charged conversation. Everyone has a different opinion and a different stance on why they have that opinion. And everyone is perfectly entitled. There's no right answer. There's no wrong answer, no right answer. It's very, very subjective. But I think it's worth talking about it and looking at why it's worth saving some of these things. Like I said, I think maybe starting with the Capitol is a good starting point and going from there. That conversation led me to think, okay, so there's broken windows, there's small things, there's bullet holes. Is it what makes a point and what is something that can be learned from and what is something that either memorializes or celebrates what happened? And that's what a lot of preservationists are kind of struggling with, is where's that stopping point? Obviously repairs to the exterior things that, allow the elements in, that all needs to be repaired. That's not even a question. Because you can't just sit there having the rain coming in. That's no. But there are some really good examples of some interpretive things that have been left. So one of the examples that was used a lot was actually the White House, and let me see, am I going to screen share briefly? Oh, I don't have the pictures up. All right, we'll screen share another time. I'll add some articles maybe or some links in the comments section, which, by the way, if you do want to start commenting, please feel free, comment away as usual. So one of the examples I like is in the White House. There's actually a window that has a good bit of char around the frame, the sill, and a bit of the is still charred, and that they haven't repaired that from the War of 1812 when the White House was burned. It still tells that story, and it's, I think, a learning point that yes, everything is vulnerable. Nothing is impregnable, impenetrable. Everything can be damaged, and what is that? So I really like that example of retaining that. So some of the questions were, like, are the bullet holes worth retaining? And again, is that a memorial in a negative sense, in that it continues to stoke the flames for things like that? But that also leads me to think about other damage that has happened over the last year. We saw a lot of protesting, we saw a lot of rioting, we saw a lot of damage happen to a lot of really amazing buildings that tell really important stories, both locally, nationally. And so I think it's worthwhile kind of asking on what level, what kind of events and things and changes, alterations, damage, whatnot, tells that story. There's a great building in Lewis that got hit with a cannonball, and the cannonball is still in the exterior. Most of the things that I could find when I did a quick search about damage that had been retained are from battles and wars and big things like that. But I wonder, are there smaller things that are worth retaining that continue to tell our story? And obviously, they'd be more, I guess, changes rather than damage, because if it's damage, it's happening from something catastrophic and big, whether it's rioting or a battle or whatever. But like I think about like the Black Lives Movement and how as that was going on in tandem, there was hitting and things like that, that some was tied, some wasn't. Again, not going into that whole bailiwick there, but there was damage that happened with that. Is there things that can be kept and preserved? And I think a great example of that is the artwork that came out of a lot of that. After the damage had happened, windows were boarded up, people created this beautiful artwork, especially downtown Troy had tons and tons of it. Albany had some good pieces too, but Troy seemed to really have a lot. And I think those pieces are being preserved with the Hart Clute Museum and the Rensselaer County Historical Society. So I think a lot of stuff like that is really looking at. So I want everyone to think, what are some things they've seen, examples that they've seen, can think, things that have happened in buildings that you think tells a story, that you think is important to a building's past, and things that we can learn from, because it's not just about the building. I think that's one thing that preservationists get wrapped up in a lot is, it's yes, we focus on the built environment, obviously more than people, but buildings are built for people. And as I see it, preservation and why we protect these buildings and preserve them is because it creates the environment that creates who we are as a society and as people. And it shapes, those experiences shape who we are, how we behave, how we think. And maybe seeing something jarring like that, how does that impact us, and how does that teach us to not behave that way, or to stand up for ourselves, or to do what we think it needs us to do? So I wonder, are there any other really good local examples that you guys can think of things that have happened in the capital region that have impacted the built environment that are worth keeping or were worth thinking about? There are things that obviously probably have been changed or corrected by now. But it's just, food for thought. So I guess ended technical. So I guess a weird um, oh, someone has a comment, how lives matter riots. No, I guess it's not specific to Albany history, but I think it's something that's pertinent at the time. I can go into more specifics, I guess, about what happened in Albany with the Black Lives Matter movement, between storefronts that were destroyed, and I guess to keep in with the retain versus repair is some of the damage from that. There's still plenty left. Most things have been repaired, obviously smashed glass has, but is some of that worth retaining? And again, I guess the artwork maybe goes with that a little bit, hopefully. I hope that answered enough of your question, sir. But again, it's mostly just food for thought. It's something just to get people thinking as we start this new year in a very bizarre way. So I think I will sign off for today, and see you guys hopefully in a few weeks. Whatnot, but I should be back on my every 2-week schedule. And I think next time we're going to talk about street names a little bit to get ready for Historic Albany's book club, reading the address book. So thank you guys for joining me for, again, this kind of bizarre chat today. But to all of you, and I will see you all again soon.